Now, where I went to school, and 80%, well, that was a C. And that's what the Obama administration is shooting for, a C? Well, they may be lucky they're only answering to the American people and not those nuns.
The regime's goal is to see 80% of users able to complete their enrollment process by November 30th.
I think the way to look at that figure is that of, say, 10 who go on the system, roughly 2 won't get through.
This thing is failing, but this is failing much faster than they expected.
At the regime today acknowledged a willingness to accept a 20% failure rate.
But again, the measure will be how many more people can sign up.
It's beyond the website. When the website gets fixed, I think Americans are going to be shocked to see that there's still a problem.
They're just going to have to slog it through and fix the website.
We will not have a perfect website, as is the case with all complex websites.
Imagine if a private sector business tried to get away with it. But the regime wants us to sing their praises over a failure rate that's only 20%.
I think they're going to have to hold somebody accountable for the botched rollout and the website not working.
What does it take for someone to get fired by this administration?
I think if this were to happen in the private sector, somebody would have probably already lost their job.
So if one of President Obama's BFFs, Robert Gibbs, says heads should roll, whose head? Who should get fired? Republican Senator Mike Lee joins us. Nice to see you.
Likewise, thank you.
Well, that was a surprise. Robert Gibbs thinks that some heads should symbolically roll.
Yeah, it was interesting. You know, it's also interesting to note that in this administration, about the only people who do get fired are those who dare to publicly criticize the administration.
And you're referring to the insurance commissioner here in Washington, D.C., who published that he didn't think it was a wild idea, the fix. Consequently, out the door. The mayor fired him.
That's right. That's right. But, you know, I think the much more important question, rather than talking about who should get fired or where we should extract the pound of flesh, we ought to be talking about how we can best help those people who have been harmed by Obamacare, the millions of people who have lost their jobs or their health care because of this law. That's really where we ought to be focused.
What do you make of the 80% figure? Is that sort of low expectations, meaning that, you know, so that if the White House fixes it so that we're up to 85%, they can declare victory on November 30th? Or are they drawing another line in the sand, giving themselves more trouble because we have such high expectations? We expect everything. They told us to be fixed by November 30th. So now, you know, are they now telling us 80%, at least are they telling us to expect that? That's realistic?
I think they're setting the expectation really, really low. I think they're deliberately doing something that they're relatively confident they can achieve. But, you know, even if they hit that 80% mark, first of all, as you point out, that's still a C. Secondly, it still ignores the fact that the law is fundamentally flawed. In other words, for years, many of us have been looking at this law and saying this thing is headed off a cliff. No matter how well the train is running as it heads toward the cliff, if you know that it's going to go off the cliff at some point, that's the problem we ought to be focused on.
I fully expect the website to be up and running. And, you know, at some point, it may be November 30th or December 30th, and we'll go through all sorts of, you know, hardships for a lot of American people. But the one thing I do not understand is, how are we funding this? Where are we getting the money? I know there are little taxes here, little taxes there, but if the healthy young people don't come in droves, is this thing going to collapse?
Yes, it will collapse, and I think it is destined for collapse, and I think most people in the administration acknowledge that it's going to collapse. The difference is that a lot of people within the administration and people like Harry Reid have acknowledged that not if, but when it does collapse, they hope that we will quickly move toward a single-payer health care system. That's one of the many problems with this law, is that it was built to fail. It was built to fail knowing that it would fail, and that as it failed, it would harm many millions of Americans, hardworking Americans, who would lose their jobs and lose their health care.
So what is the solution? I mean, I know that you don't like Obamacare. I know that you want to repeal it, but in recognition of where we are, and how we try to inflict the least amount of pain on Americans, and especially though, I mean, the ones who I'm really worried about are the ones who are either don't have the funds or who are sick.
Yes, and I think there are ways that we can deal with those, but I think in the meantime, we've got to suspend Obamacare in its entirety. I don't think we can just stop part of it. I don't think the president has authority constitutionally or statutorily to just suspend one part of the law. I think we've got to suspend the whole law and go back to Congress and allow Congress to introduce additional ideas, new ideas.
So what, I mean, just, give the people, some idea of what there is out there, because, what the American people hear, they either hate Obamacare or love Obamacare, but the one thing you know is that the Republicans don't like it and want to repeal it. So, what is, I mean, if there were no Obamacare, what could you do? What could you pass? How can you make it better for the American people?
First of all, if there were no Obamacare at all, the discussion might be a little bit different than it is today. But we are facing Obamacare, so we've got to deal with where to go from that. There are Republican proposals, proposals that haven't yet gotten a lot of attention, but are going to start getting a lot of attention soon. One was released recently by the Republican Study Committee in the House of Representatives. It calls for a system of tax credits that would enable Americans to buy health insurance with some government assistance, but it would leave the decision-making power in the hands of the American people rather than in the hands of government.
Well, tax credits to me always, I mean, when I hear about tax credits and subsidies, the first thing I think is that it goes to the American people, but then what I realize it's sort of like it's a guaranteed payment to the insurance companies, right? Isn't that what they are?
Yes, perhaps, but again, we have to start not with the government we wish we had, but the government we in fact have. And with Obamacare on the table, that looks like a much better alternative to turn to something like that rather than this, allowing the American people to use their own decision-making power to figure out where best to get their insurance. And it would also incorporate certain ideas regarding the portability of insurance, that you could buy insurance across state lines, that you could carry it from one state to another as you moved, and you could carry it from one job to another.
How are the insurance companies doing these days? I mean, are they doing pretty well?
Well, I think they're pulling their hair out right now.
I know, but not just in sort of the chaos and disorder, but financially.
Oh. Financially, I think they're doing well, and I think that they expected to do well under Obamacare, and that's why a lot of them either sat quietly or in some cases sat loudly cheerleading from the sidelines as this law was being debated.
The reason I ask is because as I look deeper and deeper into this bill, and it is rather complex, I see certain advantages to the insurance companies. I mean, that they're going to, I mean, if you look at even the credits, is that they are guaranteed their payment. And when I practiced law, if I had the government guaranteeing my payment, that's not bad.
Yeah, it's
a good deal.
It's certainly a good deal for them, and that's why a lot of them were really cheering from the sidelines, encouraging Congress to pass this. I think a lot of them have some buyer's remorse now that they're seeing that the law isn't what it was sold as, and that the law is being modified again and again and again by a president who has no statutory authority to revise acts of Congress, and he has no constitutional authority to do that either.
What would you like the president to do at this point? I mean, here's the law. I mean, he can't repeal it himself, right?
He can't repeal it himself, but what I would like the president to do is to acknowledge what the American people are already seeing, which is that this law is not ready. This law was ill-conceived from the outset, and this law should be suspended. He should go to Congress and ask Congress to suspend it for at least a year while Congress figures out a way forward.
And Congress would do, I know the House would do that, and the Senate?
If the president asked them to do it, I believe the Senate would comply.
Well, Senator Harry Reid certainly is a champion of Obamacare.
He is a champion of Obamacare, and the Democrats in the Senate, including Harry Reid, have generally tended to do what the president has asked, especially with regard to Obamacare. And so, for that reason, if he asked for it, I think they would do it.
And it does seem that there are some Democratic senators who are starting to feel a little raw around the edges, like Senator Landrieu of Louisiana, and Senator in New York, Gillibrand, seems a little unhappy too, and Shaheen, a couple of them.
And they are not alone. There are a lot of others who feel the same way. They're feeling pressure from their constituents. They're getting calls from their constituents every day saying, please help me. I'm hurting under this law. I've lost my job or I'm losing my health insurance.
Senator, nice to see you. Always nice to see you, sir.